Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, Nant, and Shalom. Welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. That's right. It is a Wednesday, usually at 7 p.m., but we're a little behind this week. It's 7:30 p.m. on a Wednesday on the 14th of July. I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. My name is Sihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it. Molo Sanbonani, hello, hello. Goodness gracious me. Oh, pardon me. I'm literally salivating at the prospect of what we're going to be discussing tonight, because there is a conversation to be had. There is definitely a conversation to be had around how you, the faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, begins to wage a pushback against what has been a rather nefarious and frightening lot of people, the political elites who have incited a violence in this country, which is borderline on seditious in its nature, and really does resemble a mighty familiar-looking coup attempt. I say familiar in the sense that we've seen this kind of behavior in other parts of the world, especially here in Cape Town, when liberation movements that fail to transition into becoming, firstly, a political party, and then secondly, if they win power, becoming a government, then resort to factionalized battles amongst itself, which corrupt the society and which destroy the very society they claim to care about. So we're going to have a conversation tonight around what you, that faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African, what you must do in order to defend your family, defend your life, your liberty, and your property rights. So we're going to have that conversation tonight, and I'm going to show you that it's very possible. This isn't just a waffling session by Big Daddy Liberty. There are South Africans right now, as we speak, who are doing exactly what I'm talking about. And my argument is more of us should be doing that. Now, before I get into any of that, welcome to it. I see the numbers are coming up. Tada, welcome to it. Please, as you enter this stream, hit the like button. Keep the engagement up, please, above 50%. We're doing terribly at the moment. There's about 312 of you, and it's rising rapidly, but only 22 likes. Come on, man. Give me my likes, people. Give me my likes. Hit that like button right now. And as I always joke, help feed a kid in Africa once you do that. But hit those likes, people. I want to see that 50% engagement. We're going to have a very serious conversation tonight. And it's one in which, by the end of it, I'm hoping that you will be empowered to rally the people around you, band together, as I've been saying the entire week on social media, in order to defend your life, your liberty, and your property rights. That's the conversation we're having here tonight. So there'll be no doom and gloom. I'm not going to be posting a lot of the videos that you've seen gone up that are meant to sensationalize you and, no. Tonight is about having a pointed, honest conversation on how you push back against the political elites, how you defend your life, how you defend your liberty, and how you defend your property rights. That is the conversation we have here. That is that Mazakele spirit that I often talk about. So with that being said, welcome to it. This is the BDL show. I'm going to take a quick break. After the break, we get into that conversation as I show you what exactly I'm talking about when I say band together and defend life, liberty, and property rights. All right, my breaks are always quick. You guys know that. Welcome back. So it has been an interesting week, as you can obviously tell, and it's not even we're barely halfway through the week, as we now see a growing situation of what appears to be a confluence of things. In other words, multiple things happening at once. Remember, I just did a vlog earlier today, vlog 106. You can find that on any of my social media pages, YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. I did a vlog on this particular issue, and I said to you guys, in terms of my analysis of what's happening in the country at the moment, multiple things can be true at once. Let me repeat that point. Multiple things can be true at once. And do not allow yourself to be limited in your analysis, in your consciousness of what's happening, to choosing a particular camp and sticking with it. What do I mean by this? If you've been watching social media, if you've been watching the mainstream media, there is a rushed attempt to try and say, well, we're seeing all of the looting, the anarchy, and the chaos because of, poor people who are taken to the streets because of a frustration of the lockdown and the like. Now, that's one argument. And yes, there very well could be, and highly likely, is a lot of truth to that. In fact, I would also argue in support of that view that it took Cyril Ramaphosa and really a political elite who are tone deaf in this country, it took them plunging this country back into a level 4 lockdown, which materially makes no difference, really, but plunged the country back into a level 4 hard lockdown for people to realize, you know what, these political elites and these politicians actually don't understand the pain of this lockdown. And a lot of South Africans have been saying for a very long time, it's been building. This is not new. It's been building. South Africans have been saying for a very long time, I would rather take the risk. Give me the freedom to make decisions about the amount of risk I am willing to take as a citizen so that I can continue to at least put bread on the table. Because if there is no bread on the table, if there is no ability for me to afford a medical aid, or at the very least have some savings, which can afford me better healthcare and not be dependent on state healthcare, if I don't have the income to be able to provide for family, extended family, then I am in a worse shape, and I'm at a worse point, in terms of actually facing the COVID virus than I would be if I had employment and an income. That is a cold, hard fact. South Africans have been saying that for a very long time, but the people who do not listen to this argument and don't even give it a credence because they've got their experts that they listen to, the very same experts, of course, who don't pay any credence to the lived reality of South Africans, those people, the political elites, the politicians, and the elite experts who have the ear of government, have been pushing on with this lockdown approach, which is literally devastating millions of South Africans. And now it is those same elites who are surprised when the very poor people who've been saying this from the beginning, from the jump, are literally saying, you know what, to hell with you and your lockdown regulations. We are taking to the streets, we'll loot everything. We will loot everything. So that the first argument, that first bit of analysis as to why this is happening, with the argument being that it's poor people, looking for bread and food and whatever the case may be, is absolutely valid. There is a large proportion of the looting that has that as its reason, that has that as its genesis. But then even as I say this, someone comes back to me and says, but hang on, it's not just bread and food and milk and whatever, groceries that they're looting. They're also looting things like TVs and, household appliances. And, they're raiding, for God's sakes, they walked into a South African National Blood Service Bank. Obviously, they didn't loot anything necessarily there, but they just destroyed things. Why? Why is it two things? Why are they looting things that have nothing to do with so-called basic needs like food? And number two, why is there so much destruction involved in it? And again, in vlog 106, I went through this, albeit briefly, but I'll take a bit of time now to unpack what I meant. On the first question as to why poor people who are, if we take the argument that it's poor people frustrated by lockdowns who are doing the looting, why are they not just looting food items and leaving everything else? Well, because you need to understand that poor people are like any other person. They are aspirant like you and me. They too want to be able to live a high standard of living like any other middle-class South African, so that your snobbishness, if you're in the elites, or maybe if you're part of the middle class who doesn't understand this, your snobbishness doesn't allow yourself to see that a poor person who has been living in a shack on a sand dune in Cape Town under lockdown conditions also then looks at the rest of society who, for them, lockdown has been comfortable because we have creature comforts, right? We have nice couches, we have appliances, washing machines, dryers, dishwashers, great flat screen TVs. I'm naming all of these things just for perspective. That same poor person who aspires to have those sort of things too, to create a higher quality of life in them, will, of course, if there is anarchy and chaos, take the opportunity, if it presents itself, to loot those things too. Now, as I say this, I'm not condoning this. I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying it's acceptable. It's completely unacceptable. But you've got to understand that if you're going to analyze the political situation that you're in, if you're going to analyze society and apply what we call as sociologists the sociological imagination, you've got to be able to see things beyond your own limitations and your own preconceived notions of what society looks like. And that basically allows you to then understand, not necessarily accept, not necessarily condone, but understand what is happening around you. So that I hope that answers that first question that people often ask when they accept the argument that this is about poor people, rebelling against a lockdown that has impoverished them even further. Because that first question is often always, well, then why do they always loot things other than basic goods? And as I've said, poor people are aspirational like anybody else. So of course they'll go, if the opportunity presents itself, and loot things like TVs and microwaves and blah, 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 can go down the line. Again, not accepting it, just describing in a condensed analysis as to why we see this happening. And this is my musings on this issue. Then there's that second question of, well, okay, fine, Big Daddy, we get it. Poor people are aspirational and they too would want to loot TVs and items other than basic goods, right? But what about the destruction? Why destroy things? Why leave a trail of destruction as you do this? And again, if you apply sociological reasoning to this or just basic analysis, you've got to ask yourself the question, where do you live? Where do you live, dear South African? And in asking yourself the question, then answer the second question, who is in power in that country that you live in? And how did they, in their march to power, behave and conduct themselves? What culture did they instill in a society under, for example, the liberation era, in the struggle area? And let me be precise and specific. I'm talking, of course, about the ANC. The culture of rampant public violence, destruction, and sheer chaos that you often see at so-called protests, because that's how the South African media characterizes riots, as protests. The culture of rampant violence and public violence and destruction that you often see is a learned behavior, a learned culture that has been infused in our society, ironically, by a lot of the liberation movements, one of which finds itself in government today, namely the ANC. The ANC, in the run-up to democracy in this country, used to quite literally embark on what they called campaigns to render the country ungovernable. And part of that campaign was exactly what? To destroy public infrastructure, because the argument then was that the infrastructure served the apartheid government. So to destroy public infrastructure, to sabotage services that were rendered by the apartheid government. Why? Same argument. They argued this is not infrastructure that benefits blacks, they argued back then. It's for white individuals. So sabotage it, destroy it. This is the culture, unfortunately. Of course, the final one before I forget. The notion of disrupting the economy. Why? Because the ANC argued under liberation, and there are still pockets of the ANC today that make the same argument that, well, this economy is white anyway. So what's a few black people losing their jobs when we're going after the white economy, or as they've rebranded it now, white monopoly capital? This is the socialist and communist rhetoric that they used to push into society in the campaign, of course, or what they used to call rendering a society ungovernable. And what the ANC and liberation parties didn't do when they came into power is to disavow this behavior and say it's completely unacceptable in what is now a democratic society where there is shared public infrastructure for everybody. The ANC never did that. It kept this behavior in their back pocket. And if you want to know what I'm talking about generally, because I'm sort of glancing over it for the purposes of time, read a book called by Dr. Anthea Jeffrey called The People's War. For you to understand what exactly the ANC was doing, that it was systematic, it was purposeful, and it was driven at destroying infrastructure under the argument back then that that infrastructure belonged to an apartheid government. But unfortunately, that behavior, that culture still endures to this day and has not been challenged by an ANC who today sits in government as a government. So those chickens, those political chickens, that political culture as chickens, if I'm to keep to this analogy, are literally coming home to roost. Literally coming home to roost to plague the very same ANC who now is in government, but pushed that culture into most communities, specifically Black communities, under apartheid. So that's why you see the destruction, the public violence, the wanton disregard for property rights, really. It finds its roots in liberation politics, a liberation politics, of course, which was deeply rooted in leftist ideology, socialism and communism. The idea that property doesn't matter anyway. Gotta know your politics, so you're not going to be dribbled out here, listening to weak-ass analysis in the mainstream media. Gotta know your politics, people. Gotta know your politics. So that's that one leg of the tripod. You know, the why are people looting question? It's because of, you know, poverty, level 4 lockdown, and the like. That's the one element that has dominated discourse in terms of people trying to explain why this is happening. There's the other one, of course, and relax, guys, relax. We're going to take the time in this episode to go through all the arguments, all the analysis, and I'll check out some questions too. So relax, get a drink, listen in, if you do have a drink, goodness. So that's the one leg of the Zulu pot, of the Poiki pot. The second one, in terms of the analysis of what's going on in South Africa right now, involves the argument around incitement by the political elites. Let me repeat that. The second leg of the analysis, and remember the argument I'm making here, is that right now, each of these arguments is being presented as being separate. But I'm of the view that multiple things can be true at once. So we've done the first argument. Let's look at the second one. The second one then speaks to the argument that what we're seeing right now is a consequence of incitement by politicians and particularly the political elites and their operatives. This argument basically puts the Zuma family firmly in the crosshairs of this analysis, specifically some of the influencer children of Jacob Zuma, the likes of Duduzane Zuma, the male, and Duduzile Sambuka Zuma, I think is the double barrel surname, who's the female. Both kids of Jacob Zuma, both quite prolific on social media, who have quite literally been pushing and inciting, or rather pushing and inciting the chaos and the wanton destruction that we've been seeing across the society right now, under the guise, of course, of the Free Jacob Zuma campaign, hashtag Free Jacob Zuma, and other various campaigns that they've been in a rather asinine way been pushing to incite violence. Of course, they're joined by the tacit approval of some politicians like Julius Malema, who is not speaking out against this because it affects Black lives or it affects South African lives. He's only speaking out for the purposes of winning Black votes. Yes, I said it. Julius Malema doesn't actually care about the Black lives that he often talks about, often condescendingly calling us the African child or the Black child. He doesn't give a rat's ass about people's lives, let alone Black people's lives. What he cares about is Black votes. And what he's frustrated by right now is that all of this revolution is happening and it had nothing to do with him. The very person who's always talking about we are going to lead the revolution had nothing to do with him. So he's feeling that FOMO. And a lot of the commentary he pushes out that tacitly incites violence, hence he got blocked by Twitter for a few hours just to say, hey, chill, cool down, man. Twitter blocked his ass for 12 hours. They put your finger here. put your finger here, is what Twitter said to Malema, for 12 hours, is because he was basically saying, oh, if you dare enforce the law, then we'll have our fighters on the street to respond to that. In reference, of course, to Cyril Ramaphosa proposing the army to hit the street. So let me come back to the argument. So remember, the second leg, what we're discussing in terms of the analysis you've been seeing, that's been segmented, but I want to argue can actually be multiple things true at once. The second argument is that this has everything to do with the incitement to violence by political elites, and the Zuma family is at the helm of that. The Zuma family, of course, through their two children who have very big profiles on social media, who've been pushing a narrative, a race-based narrative, that somehow the arrest of Jacob Zuma is because of white people control Ramaphosa is funded by white monopoly capital, that's why Zuma is being arrested, blah, 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 blah. There is a whole narrative that they are pushing. Their whole narrative that they're pushing in order to initially try and brand the anarchy as being a Zuma project, right? That's what we saw initially. But for the average South African, I think we woke up pretty quickly to realize that this is not just about Zuma. Yes, there are agitators, there are instigators who are of a Zuma-esque, or what I like to call Zuma Inc., because it's a corporation, quite literally, the Zuma family, and the grift, the political grift of this family is spectacular. How people can live luxuriously off of the public purse and see nothing wrong with that when they then incite violence on the same public that funds their lifestyle. It's the hypocrisy of our age, if I'm to be brutally honest with you, and it's why I rail against politicians and I rail against political elites. But anyway, let me move on to keep to the point, sorry. So the second argument that we've seen is, yes, this stemmed from Zuma and inciting the violence, and that it's mostly a PR campaign, but it's found resonance with a already frustrated public, and they just rode that wave, and they continue to do so by continuing to instigate, by continuing to incite violence in social media posts. And I've heard a whole bunch of rather frightening rhetoric and propaganda on WhatsApp voice notes, for example, being shared around. And of course, the whole element of race is involved in it. So now that there are residents, for example, who are pushing back and fighting back, what do they say? Oh, how dare those minorities, they say, defend themselves? How dare they defend themselves against our attempts to bring harm against them, harm to their life, liberty, and property? How dare those minorities, whether they're Indians, who are now being told are systematically killing blacks in a wanton disregard. And of course, don't get me wrong, there probably are cases out there where there's been inappropriate and actually unlawful behavior, don't get me wrong, but the systematic bit is what gets to me in terms of pushing the narrative, pushing the lie, because they've got to ostracize minorities. And that's why I said in that tweet, I'm surprised we haven't seen them blame white people yet for the actual looting and the rioting. But I was proven wrong because they later did. If there's one thing I always say, never underestimate the predictability of a dumbass politician. Too predictable. But anyway, that second leg, therefore, is the incitement argument made on behalf of political elites inciting the violence as a reason for this. Then there's the third leg of the Potjie pot. And trust me, you'll see why I'm arguing that multiple things can be true at once. And these are all linked issues. The third leg of the Potjie pot involves the second, but goes into a very deep and dangerous place. What am I talking about? That same Zuma family, the same faction of the same Zuma faction, of the ANC. All of this has the ANC at its heart. Political failure is at the heart of all of these legs, and I'm going to make the argument here. The third leg, of course, is one of sedition and terrorism, actual orchestrated behavior by a cohort of people who are using the anarchy, the violence, the chaos as cover for more targeted attacks on public infrastructure and private infrastructure that is meant to uphold society. So that third leg of the argument, of course, is, as I said, it's the sedition and terrorism argument. Why do I raise this particular third arm? The third arm is important because it cites its existence, its reason for existing, pardon me, to an allegiance to Jacob Zuma. That's why it's linked to the second reason that we just spoke about now, the notion of political elites inciting violence. So the third one of sedition and terrorism is using the second, or particularly using the chaos, the anarchy, and the disorder right now to actually have a small cohort of people. And if you read the News 24 exclusive article that named a particular individual, I can't think of his name right now, a former state security agent, Ewan Gomo, who then became ambassador to Japan. The News 24 article alleges that he is prime suspect number one by the state in terms of answering the question of who is possibly behind the alleged coup attempt, and really more pertinently terrorism and seditious behavior that we're seeing. Because in and amongst the looting, which appears random at times, which appears uncoordinated, if you are awake to what you're seeing, you'll realize that it's not random and it's not haphazard. Why do I say that? Number one, it's systematic and coordinated. There are allegations that there are people being bussed in to certain sites to conduct looting at certain strategic sites. And it's systematic, and it's almost phased in its nature. It began with the looting of shop fronts and malls. So the very places that you and I will go in order to buy something that we need for our day-to-day, right? So the shop fronts, the malls, the strip malls, the shopping centers were destroyed and looted. Then it progressed, which is where it showed a behavior of being orchestrated. Then it progressed to attacking facilities that supply those shop fronts, namely warehouses and distribution centers by corporates. For example, in Durban, and I'll play clips of it, the Macro Group, which is owned by Walmart, if I'm not mistaken, and of course the Game stores, the distribution center in Durban, the Game one, company Game, I think is owned by Massmart, was completely ransacked in what looked like a very orchestrated incident, insofar as there was taxis all over the place that had bussed people in, allegedly, and there were actually buses that were said to have been used to bus people in. But let me not talk about it. Let me show you exactly what I'm talking about, as I've clipped it here. Let me just find it. Let's roll clip 1. Again, you hear it in the particular clip, which I found online on Twitter, where the person narrating points out that there sure is a lot of taxis that are entering and exiting that particular facility, and a complete chaotic situation as people looted that distribution center. The very same distribution center which, after the shops were looted, would have been used to replenish goods on a shop front way. So it seemed systematic. It began at the shop front, and once there is, those have been cleared out, it moved to distribution centers, with the view, of course, of destroying that supply chain between distribution centers, warehouses, distribution centers, and the shopping front. And more ominously, if you're paying attention, you'll realize that not only has it now moved from the shop front to distribution and warehousing, it's now moved to the very infrastructure and services which lubricate the supply chain network, namely logistics. There was, as we saw on the N3, pardon me, that's the Nike 3, N3, we saw at the Moy Plaza toll gate. That's the N3, of course, is the freeway between Johannesburg and Durban. At the Moy Plaza toll gate, trucks were burnt. There were shells of themselves after a wanton looting and destruction spree by peoples unknown so far, destroying this particular infrastructure, all initially under the name of hands off or free Jacob Zuma. So there's clearly a targeting of the logistics and supply chain network. Not only were those trucks burnt, in some ports, the port of Durban was disrupted to the point where it had to be closed at some point. Therefore, cutting the link between the port of entry, where we receive goods and which often go to distribution centers, which then will find their ways to shops. So clearly someone is targeting the logistic networks and the supply chain, and have gone even one step further, have then forced a massive refinery network owned by SAPREF. SAPREF, I think, is a collection of, if I'm not mistaken, Engine and BP, and I think Shell, who run a refinery in Durban, massive refinery, which provides the bulk of the fuel to this particular region. That facility literally had to be shut down. It declared force majeure, if I'm pronouncing that properly, which basically means we cannot operate under these conditions. Why? Because of the wanton destruction and targeting of this infrastructure. Now you're beginning to see what's happening. Now you're beginning to see, if you're smart enough and you're awake enough, that this is orchestrated and there's definitely planning behind this. Let me take a moment just to say it's gone 8 o'clock, 30 minutes into it. You're watching the Big Daddy Liberty show. We're having a show tonight, maybe going to be an hour-long show. I'm at the halfway mark. Please hit that like button if you're enjoying this analysis and you want to hear more. Please, 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 let's keep the engagement over 50%. I see there's about 778 of us watching and only 250 likes. Guys, let's get those likes over 350, please. If you wanted to hear more of this analysis, we're talking, of course, about the 3 levels of analysis that we've been hearing, but each being argued to be separate or different. And I'm arguing that no, at the heart of it, multiple things can be true at once, number one. And number two, the common thread in it is the African National Congress and its various factions. Hit the like button, please, if you want to hear this. Oh, there's now 800 of us joining us. Welcome to it. This is the BDL show. So that third element, though, so remember, let me do a quick recap. The first one was the argument that it's just poor people, it's just criminality, it's just looting, right? Criminality, just looting. And I went through the various sub-arguments under there. You can go back later in the video to watch that. The second argument we said, in terms of what you're hearing on social media and on the mainstream media, is oh no, this is violence that actually is happening because of the incitement by political elites and politicians. At the helm of that is the Zuma family, namely the kids with their big profile on social media, pushing this rhetoric. And the third, which is the one I've been grappling on, is linked to the second insofar as it goes deeper on the Zuma issue by saying, no, it's not just instigating and, a bit of social media incitement here and there. There is a particular cohort of operatives, pro-Zuma faction operatives, many of whom allegedly have state security training. In other words, spooks and spies who are launching an orchestrated attempt, a seditious one, against the South African government and society. And beyond that, are using the chaos, the looting as cover for attacks on more strategic locations. And I was just talking about, firstly, they're targeting the supply chain network that feeds effectively that part of South Africa, that almost a whole eastern section of South Africa, with the N3 corridor from Durban to Joburg all the way to Limpopo being absolutely critical. They're disrupting that network on purpose. And these are targeted attacks. And it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. Not only are they attacking the supply chain network and the logistics that supports that, there's also been attacks, pardon me, on water infrastructure in Pietermaritzburg. There's a News Africa insert on that particular issue, where there's an attempt attack on a water facility, and cell phone companies have reported that over 100 of their cell phone towers across that particular part of the world have literally been stripped of batteries, destroyed, or there's an attempt to sabotage them in one way or the other. In Johannesburg or Gauteng and KZN, there have also been reports by particularly local community stations, that's community radio stations, pardon me, that they've been looted and ransacked, but it seemed more like just a ransacking of the facility than necessarily pillaging and looting. So there's clearly a coordinated attack here on the ability to communicate effectively to the public by the state, and of course by those of us who are pushing against this, in order to prioritize the nefarious lot, that political elite I spoke about in the second leg of the Poiki, who are pushing their propaganda that this is a, quote, revolution in defense of Jacob Zuma. So those are the three legs. Those are the three legs of argument that we've been hearing in a scattered sense, where people are picking one camp over the next. And I'm arguing to you, and I'm putting it to you, that actually multiple things can be true at once. All three of those legs are required for the Zulu pot or the Poiki pot to sit up and bubble away, as South Africa is at the moment. It is a bubbling cauldron at the moment. So that's the analysis that I'm pushing out here, so that people understand where this is coming from and the three levels of analysis to it, so that we can answer the question of how do we fight back? How do we push back? How do we defend ourselves as the law-abiding South Africans, those faith, flag, family, and freedom type South Africans that I often talk about? How do we push back and defend our life, liberty, and property? Now, to this end, we're beginning to see fellow South Africans do exactly that. But let me show you the context. So I've discussed those three legs, right? But let me show you what we're facing here. Let me give you visuals of what I'm talking about. You know, the wanton destruction, the seemingly coordinated nature of it. I showed you the distribution center in Durban, the game one that was looted, and the involvement allegedly of people being bussed in, lending to the argument that this is coordinated. But look at the wanton destruction that is often left in the path. Again, we go to Durban, this time on Queen Nandi Drive, and you get to see just how the looting and the destruction is meant to disrupt things.
Right, so this is Queen Nandi Drive now this morning. Cars shot out left here. Millions of rands worth of stuff littering everywhere. Massive warehouse on fire.
I will never be able to put this fire.
Petrol station looted.
Who's going to reinvest?
Appliances and millions of rands worth of stuff all over. Trucks, forklifts all over the road. You can hear some shots in the background. Millions of rands worth of stuff. Like trucks abandoned everywhere. Trucks burnt out on the road.
What's the truck?
This is Queen Nandi Drive, folks, or the petrol station.
Well, yeah, it's a little hard for me to watch because I grew up in Durban. I know exactly where that spot is. You know, I have family in Durban. You know, I have family in Johannesburg. It's tough to watch this because you can see what's happening, that there is a trail of destruction that is being left behind. Now, people are then wondering when they watch this, where are the police in all of this? Where is the ass in the hat, the Minister of Police, who loves talking tough when it comes to arresting surfers, grannies in Joburg who are selling acha, or shutting down film crews on the beach, and beachgoers? He's tough when it comes to those individuals. He's tough when it comes to sending police water cannons to be fired on the elderly who are standing in line at SASA queues in Cape Town. But where is he now when there is a desperate need for government to play the one role that I legitimately believe government has, which is law and order and enforcing the rule of law? Where is he now in all of this? Where's the tough talking Beyicel in all of this? And it begs the question. The president has appeared before this country and I said, yeah, look, police are overwhelmed, and that's why I'm sending soldiers. But how many soldiers has he sent, really? When it was level 5 lockdown, we saw brown shirts all over our streets, nearly on every single street corner. Yet, when you talk to Durbanites, when you talk to Joburg residents, very few of them of who I've engaged with, of course, not everybody, I didn't talk to everybody, but very few have said, hey man, we've actually seen soldiers and police here at a requisite number to be able to enforce law and order. People are saying, where are these soldiers and where are these police officers? And sadly, one response to that question is found in the various videos we've seen floating around that actually implicates police officers in the looting themselves. One such video is this one.
Guys, you gotta sit. We're gonna upload this thing. It's simple. Okay.
Make it famous, please. No, take a picture of this guy. No.
Policeman, yeah?
Take the nice
Policeman, yeah?
There's a policeman in uniform, looting. How beautiful. Here's his vehicle. Please look. He is looting. This is our SAPS. This is our SAPS, guys.
Guys, I've always said that the South African police service is crumbling and it's decaying because of the absolutely trash management and leadership that has crippled this institution, and a critically important institution in terms of its role for law enforcement and upholding the rule of law. Fundamentally corrupted by politicians and the management that has been deployed by politicians in many cases in there. So that you then have the decay waffling down the ranks of the police, where I'll still maintain the overwhelming majority of police officers in this country are good, honest, really want to do something for their community type police officers. The problem is, in an institution like SAPS, just having even a fraction of bad police officers, of police officers who break the law, has a profound impact on the image of the entire police force. And this guy, whoever he may be, and I'm hoping he's been locked up, who was caught red-handed by members of the public who were doing what is actually his job. That's what makes this whole thing amusing. It's members of the public who caught a police officer, members of the public doing the job that he was meant to be doing, that makes this whole thing absolutely tragic. Absolutely tragic. And has come to signify why I'm arguing the ordinary faith, flag, family, and freedom type South African has lost all hope in government. Because we're seeing what's happening around us. In fact, we recognize that that same government is actually rather hostile towards us. For example, even amongst the chaos, that same police minister who's failing to keep his own house in order is trying to now disarm us as ordinary citizens, trying to disenfranchise us from the ability to defend ourselves as citizens against the criminality, against the alleged coup attempts types. That's the South Africa I said to you. You've got to remind yourself what country you live in and who is at the helm of our politics for you to understand the analysis of what's happening around you. So that's where we're at now. But is it all doom and gloom, Big Daddy? Should we throw our hands in the air and resign ourselves to the situation we're in? And the short answer is simply no. I've said this since the beginning of the looting, the violence, the wanton disregard for human life and property. I said it from the very beginning that you are on your own, dear South African. You, the God-fearing, law-abiding, family-oriented South African, you are on your own. So what do you do in a situation like this? Don't despair. Don't gnash your teeth. Don't cry about this. Man up. Man up. Go and talk to your. Actually, let me begin this here. What do we do is the question. And I've said this before, I'll reiterate it tonight, and I'll frame the last 15 minutes in this conversation. Number one, it's a 3-stage formula or 3-word formula. And it's in the title of this video. What is required is unity, organizing, and mobilizing. And I'm going to unpack these 3 because we're beginning to see them already on the streets, and I'm arguing that more of us should be joining the effort. Unity, organizing, and mobilizing. When I say unity, number one, take a moment right now. Take a moment. You've just finished dinner. Pardon me. You've just finished dinner, have you not? Take a moment after this broadcast and just shout over to your neighbor. Hey man, hey neighbor. I've never met you before. I don't know you that well, but my name is so-and-so. This is my family. What is your name? Tell me about your family. Get to know each other in your community. Know your neighbors. Build a sense of unity amongst you as neighbors, as families in your community. Unity is critically important, and it's up to you to put in the effort to unite with your neighbors, to unite as a community, to get to know each other. If it means forming a local WhatsApp group, a Smith Street WhatsApp group, or a Tandukolo Avenue WhatsApp group of families on the street, do it. That is unity that I refer to. A strong sense of building a common purpose amongst people who share an interest in something or an area. That's unity. Do that. The second thing is, once you have that unity, once you've fostered that culture of uniting with your neighbors, uniting as a community, then you can begin to organize people. And when I talk about organizing, I mean this. It's understanding strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And saying, hey, one neighbor is a lawyer. We'll need that. Another neighbor, is a doctor or a paramedic. We'll need that. We'll need to know who's who brings what skills, what services, etc., etc. That's the nature of organizing. Having that on a list, a roster, and then organizing yourselves into various structures. Maybe the local community policing forum, get them involved. The private security companies in your area, do a tally, right? You've united your community, do a tally. How many of you have private security? Can we pool those resources to make them more effective? Have people talk, communicate amongst each other, because you are united and you're organized, or rather you're organizing in order to be organized. Once you do that, once you have the unity of purpose, once you've organized everybody and you know what's what, who's who, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, knowledge, skills, and abilities in your neighborhood, and you've got a sense of that, and if you've organized it, everybody knows what they can and can't do, then the third one is you mobilize. Woo-hoo! Now that one makes me excited. Once you've built that unity of purpose, you've organized your fellow South Africans in your neighborhood, now you begin to mobilize them. And what do I mean by mobilizing them? Form, for example, community patrol, and where you guys as a community, maybe you can do it on a roster basis, a revolving roster basis. You could patrol your own neighborhood, don some bibs, some torch, flashlights, proper tactical kit, firearms, of course, firearms. This is not a Mickey Mouse operation. Y'all better be armed. Y'all better be legally armed, proficient in firing those firearms, knowing the law. And you patrol your neighborhoods. You mobilize as a community to protect the families in your area, because you know the state is not going to do it. Government is not going to do it. And in a time of crisis like this one that we're in at the moment, because you know that law enforcement is not here, you, by God, can even barricade a street. Not barricade, let me not say that. But you could set up a boom gate and literally patrol your own area and control access. Now, I'm not saying, and I probably am, and let me retract it, insofar as I know that would be breaking the law, but in a time of crisis like this one, coordinate this with your local police station. Let them know what you're doing. Why? Because you're making their lives easier too. Because you're united as a community, you're organized, which helps SAPs also get a sense of what's what and what resources they can rely on. And of course, you're mobilized to even assist the South African Police Service. Because I'm not anti-South African Police Service, guys. I just believe that SAPs has to get its act together. But until they do that, we have to be united, organized, and then mobilize a response to push back and defend our communities, especially in a time of crisis like this one. But hey, don't take it from me, because maybe some of y'all are thinking, ha, there goes Big Daddy Liberty again, the crazy right-winger. Roar, there's that right-winger roar. I haven't done it in a while. Maybe the crazy right-winger Big Daddy Liberty, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, you know, or better yet, this is what I often hear. Well, of course, Big Daddy Liberty will say that, you know, it's because he wants whites to organize and defend themselves and to keep people out of other races in their neighborhood. Crap, man, crap, bull crap. It is not a racial thing. And I'll show you just now what I'm talking about. Black, white, Indian, colored, and whatever. South Africans have literally followed this advice. They've united, they've organized themselves, and they're beginning to mobilize in order to push back against the lawbreakers. Don't take it from me. Let me take you to Cape Town in Philippi Township, where you'll get to see exactly what I'm talking about, where community members there organized, united, organized, and then mobilized to defend their local mall.
Woman.
That's right. That's right. There's the energy right there, homie. There's the energy right there that I want to see amongst South Africans, various communities across the country, uniting, organizing, and then mobilizing to defend life, liberty, and property rights. But hey, maybe you're thinking, no, Big Daddy, whatever. That's just in Cape Town. You're saying that because you're in Cape Town, blah, 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 blah. Well, let me take you to Tembisa in Gauteng, where you'll get to see residents doing the exact same thing.
Hands off our mall, hands off our mall.
We never allow them mall that is left.
We never allow them to touch our mall. And they will never touch our mall.
They will never touch our mall. We are helping the police to protect this mall.
We're helping our police, we're helping our security to guard our mall.
There you have it. Again, that is in Tembisa in Gauteng. But maybe you're thinking, oh, whatever, Big Daddy, of course you'll say this. You know, once they lose on the race argument, they scramble for anything else. Oh, of course you'll say that, Big Daddy, you just hate blacks and blah, 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 blah. And of course, blacks will never work with any other racial group. My detractors will often say, bull nonsense, bull crap. Let me show you what local community members did. In addition to uniting, organizing, and mobilizing, they literally brought on the local taxi associations and said, you know what? You have a stake, dear taxi owner, dear taxi industry, in making sure this mall doesn't go up in flames. Why? Because you are transporting us, the residents, often from our homes to this mall. Join us in the fight. Let's defend our businesses. I take you now to Nigel in Gauteng, where the very residents I talk about did exactly that. I'm not going to play this whole clip because it's a bit long, but it is essentially community members from a colored and a black African community who united with taxi association to defend their local mall.
This is Mr. Jimmy from the Nigel Dental Mall Center. Sir, we are here from Everbank. My name is Trevor. This is Kumazwane. We are guys from Tujuza, guys from the taxi association who have joined in against our Pakistani blues our responsibility to ensure that Nigel can cater still for the Nigel people and for some of the people from outside who will be needing food. So Mr. Jimmy, we want to show you guys that the men are rising up. We're going to be barricading the street from here right through to there to ensure that Nigel is safeguarded, but mainly to subconsciously make these criminals aware that we are not afraid of them. So our brothers are getting on.
There it is. There's the energy right there. And I wish I could have screenshot that little image, because you literally saw a white South African, a colored South African, and black South Africans literally saying with one united voice, we've got to protect the infrastructure, the shared infrastructure that is ours. If nothing warms your heart other than that, I don't know what else I can show you. I don't know what else I can show you. Again, it won't be pretty. It won't be pretty. But this is what happens when you live in a society where the state has failed at its primary responsibility. It then becomes up to ordinary residents to band together, unite, organize, and then mobilize a defense of life, liberty, and property rights. But again, you're probably thinking, hey, Big Daddy, that's all in the Western Cape where no protests and no looting has happened. And you've showed us Gauteng, but that's not where the worst of it is, right, Big Daddy? How about you show us something in KZN? Well, there we go. We've got you, Big Daddy. You're not going to be able to show us that sort of unity and pushing back against the looting in KZN, because those Zulus are all part of the Zuma supporting faction, another myth that we need to dispel, the myth that has been appropriated by Zuma Inc., that Zumaness is akin to Zuluness. Bull dust. Bull dust. It is absolute bull dust. And I say this as a proud Zulu myself. I've told you before, don't call me black, call me Zulu. And it has disgusted me to see how the Zuma family and that faction of the ANC have made this a tribal thing, associating their crap behavior with Zulu people. And we've got to push back against that, especially Tina Zulu. Igama likaZulu maphuma emlomeni labo. Maliphuma nje igama likaZulu emlomeni wabo. Oh, I'm angry on that point. But let me show you what I'm talking about. That dispels this myth that the Zulus are firmly behind Jacob Zuma and they believe in the anarchy. Here are residents of Ulundi and Nkandla, the heartland of Zuma himself, saying no ways to the Zuma looting and all that nonsense. Let me begin in Nkandla, the home of where a lot of this nonsense is coming from a political sense. Nkandla residents saying we're going to camp out. They're going to camp out in the town center of Nkandla and defend the infrastructure, pardon me, from the looting.
Mabuka amalungu omphakathi lana njalana nabasomabhizinisi abakhona kunamaphoyisa la kunayo yonke into lana nje ku-observiwe kuhlanganisiwe umphakathi cha isha ngonyawo phansi mabuka kunemoto ngishimpela zabahlonishwa abakhulu la enkandla bathembekile la khona wonke umuntu useshaya phansi ngonyawo wathi cha asivumeli isigila mkhuba sisole uthi inkandla kusho ukuthi ngamanye amazwi inkandla siyethi iphile mabuya phela kusho kuno-absa ngisho uba no-absa lapha noma usungasaveli kahle no-engine garage la esugade ngamehlo abomvu ukuthi usebenze kahle okusho ukuthi ke le ndawo esithi nje isele yona ndawo sithi iphephile abantu bahleli nje la bazinikela ukuhlela kuze kuse umphakathi impela nabasebenzi abala enkandla edrobheni abaselicha siyayivikela inkandla.
There you go. There you go. Let me take you to Lundi very quickly. Also in KZN.
Ngicela kancane nje bafowethu nginotha mfowethu. Ngicela ukuthi kungolo asiqede ke inkulumo yethu njengamanje. Ngithi ke ama-comrades abafike lapha bezolutha abakhohlwa. Sizobabhula ngenduku khona la. Noma abahambe laba bazolutha la. Kodwa abebeze bengazi beyitshela kuyalutha ondini. Sebefica lesi simo. Sicela ukuthi sibe ndawonye nabo. Ingenzeki leyo nto leyo. Njengoba silapha nje sizo.
That's right. Shout out to my Lundi folks. Always been amongst the more disciplined amongst us Zulus. Oh man, my heart is filled with joy. Guys, I'm trying to show you as I wrap up. I'm trying to show you that it is very possible. We can push back against the onslaught on our lives, on our liberties, and our property rights. Do not resign yourself to despair. You can push back, but the only way you can do that, the only way we can unite that middle in this country, the reasonable people, who I like to call the middle, the only way you can do that is community by community, where we build and we foster a culture of unity. Reach out to your neighbor. Tomorrow, take some dinner to your neighbor's house and say, hey man, we just brought you a casserole, we brought you some spaghetti or bolognese or whatever it may be. Reach out to your neighbor tomorrow and say, brother, sister, we may have not met before, but we need to know each other. We need to have each other's backs. We need to know each other. We need to have each other's backs, because you can see what is happening around us. Foster a culture of unity in your community. Know your neighbors, know the family in the area. And from that unity, only then can you organize people, because you know them, you have a one-on-one relationship with those people. Only then can you organize them. So what are your skills? What can you do? Oh, you're a paramedic, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're a firefighter, you're a police officer. All of these skills are what allow you to build a database of a database of organization, if I can put it that way, in your community, so that you can then begin to mobilize your community. Unity, organizing, and mobilizing your community. Mobilizing us to defend our life, our liberty, our property rights, defend our communities and our families. Guys, it's not rocket science. I've shown you South Africans who are doing this in each in their own individual small way. And I'm putting it to you. This is the challenge. This is the Big Daddy Liberty challenge for the evening, for the week. For the week. Especially us as men in our communities. Let us talk to each other. Let us play that role that God has given us as men, of being protectors, providers, and transmitters of values, culture, and religion in our society, or specifically in our family, pardon me, that can have a spill-off in our society, where we can encourage each other to defend our families, irrespective of race, religion. I don't care. I've lived in Durban, where I can tell you now, you can have a Hindi neighbor to your left, a Muslim neighbor on your right. Jewish as I am. And we will band together. Why? Because we know each other as neighbors. And we'll defend each other's families. The only way you can do that is unity of purpose, organizing the people around you who you love and care for, who you call kin, who you call neighbor. And the last one, of course, is then mobilizing a defense of them, defending our life, liberty, and our property rights. And there are a myriad of ways in which you can do that. But it can only happen once you're organized and you're mobilizing people. And key to that is finding out who's who, what resources do we have, and mobilizing those resources. If you have a gun, you're a legal gun owner, avail yourself to form part of community patrols, for example. Link up with private security in your area. Mobilize the resources, guys. It's there. It's there. Even if you're in a poor neighborhood, mobilize the resources that you have, which may include private security, and of course, link up, importantly, link up with your local police station and the local station commander and say, we are available to support you in your work. Let us defend our neighborhoods. That's it. That's the BDL show for this evening. Thank you so much for watching. A final reminder, just to tie this all together, consider also, guys, go to your local gun shop and apply to become a legal firearm owner in this country. It is critically important. That tool is critically important in defending us and our lives, our liberty, and our property rights. I took my best friend here in Cape Town to City Guns here in Cape Town. Shout out to City Guns. Alan, I see you, homie, out there doing a bumper trade. I took my friend to City Guns to do exactly that. And he got his paperwork to begin learning to apply for his license, of course, to carry a pistol for self-defense. And notice that I said for self-defense. Screw you, basically. You're not going to take that away from South Africans. And in fact, we're coming for you insofar as making gun ownership a right in this country. That's what we're going to aim for. We're not going to just stop at stopping you and this amendment bill. But anyway, that's another issue for another day. Took a friend. You do the same thing. Take a friend to a lot of these very responsible gun shops across the country and get started in that process of becoming a legal, responsible gun owner, because it helps build the profile of your neighborhood so that you can then unite, organize, and mobilize as a community to defend your life, your liberty, and your property rights. Guys, thanks for watching. I hope I've instilled a sense of positivity, and I'm seeing you, Heather B, for translation, please. I'm assuming you meant the video of the Ulundi. That man was a community leader of sorts, and effectively what you're saying is, if you're here to try and loot, please take your stuff, or take yourself rather, and go away. It's basically what you're saying, because they're there to defend that particular shop that was behind them. And then he said there are other people who are here to stand with them, those who are here to defend the shop. Thank you for coming, and they're welcome to stand with them. So that was the translation on that one. And of course, the Nkange one was simply a man narrating that the community had come out, including bigwigs, he said, in the community to defend the town center of Nkange, whether it was the APSA that he pointed out, or the engine garage, I think he said, or the service station at the bottom of the road, and of course the businesses in the area. They were going to camp out in Nkange, the CBD of Nkange, and protect that facility, because they said no ways are they going to see the Zumites or any looters come and destroy their local economy. I hope that helps in terms of the definition of those two videos. And thank you for watching this show. Remember, this is our country. We will defend it, and we will defend our families with everything we have got. This is a fight that we should be in insofar as uniting, organizing, and mobilizing each other and our families and our communities to defend ourselves. Do not give in, do not give up. And on that basis and on that note, let me say good night to you. Thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate it. Hit the like button, please, especially if you enjoyed this content. I will see you guys on Sunday for Liberty and Friends. Remember, Liberty and Friends always wraps up your news week by providing news, analysis, and opinion with a key panel of thinkers who are the friends of BDL. So thank you so much, guys, as I said, for watching. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. I really encourage you to please support the work that I do on the channel. I've been seeing the super chats as they came in. Thank you to everybody who contributed here on YouTube via the super chats. And if you want to support my show with a financial contribution of as little as 20 bucks a month, preferably 50 bucks a month, because it helps put the diesel in my buggy as I travel around. All of that information is in the descriptor of the video. With that being said, thank you for watching. And a reminder, as I always end the show, never trust a commie.